dear brothers and sisters, the first thing I like to say before I go into the reflection proper, I would like you to remember it. And that is what I posted around 12:15 a.m. Philippine time. And what is that? Your image, my image, your identity, my identity, your portrait, my portrait of Jesus is what shapes or determines our kind of Christianity. I say it in simple sentence. The identity of Jesus that you have is what, shapes or what determines the kind of Christian you will be. There are so many images of Jesus in the Bible. Beginning from the Jesus who was, who was born in the manger, the little baby, the incarnate word. From that time until the time that Jesus ascended into heaven, Jesus created so many images. But there's one image that is very central in the life of Jesus, and that is the image that he is the Messiah. Apart from that, he is the Messiah, he is the sovereign Messiah. He's not the kind of Messiah that the Israelites were expecting to have. So, the first question that I'm inviting us to begin to ask ourselves is, what is the type of portrait? What is the kind of identity of Jesus that you have or do I have? My dear brothers and sisters, in the gospel today, we see the Markan version of Peter's confession. I would like to move step by step because I would like you to appreciate the gospel of this day. The first thing is that Jesus was trying to move away from those. Is this the moment of withdrawal for Jesus? Jesus was withdrawing not because he was running away, but he was withdrawing to understand really the situation. He was withdrawing, playing according to the will of his Father. My dear brothers and sisters, the event of Jesus' questioning about his identity took place in Caesarea Philippi. Caesarea Philippi is a combination of two names, Caesar and Philip. Now, how did Caesar come into it? Remember that at this moment, Jerusalem was being occupied, or Israel was being occupied by the Romans. Now, to understand the name Caesarea Philippi, we understand also that Philip was one of the three sons of Herod the Great. If you cast your mind back, you remember that Herod the Great, the one who killed the innocents, was not the same Herod who killed John the Baptist. They are not the same person. The one who killed John the Baptist is the son of the one who massacred the innocents, the babies in the time of Jesus. My dear sisters and brothers, that Herod the Great had three sons. Herod Antipas, the one who murdered John the Baptist, is Herod Antipas. We have Herod Archelaus, who was ruling when Joseph and Mary came back from Egypt after running away with the baby Jesus. Then you have Herod Philip. Herod Philip was the one who was in charge of Caesarea Philippi, where this event took place. Herod Philip was a good person. Herod Philip was a man who the brother Herod Antipas took away his wife. Remember how John the Baptist's head was cut off because he said to Herod Antipas, "You should not take the wife of your brother, even though your brother Philip was still alive." Now, there are so many beautiful things of all the places in the whole world. Why did Jesus choose Caesarea Philippi to be the place that he will reveal his identity? Now, I want you to understand that in God, there is nothing like, there's nothing like coincidence. In God, there's nothing like accident. Jesus knew what he was doing. He knew he wanted to reveal himself among his disciples in that place. I would like to share with you, some of the beautiful significance of Caesarea Philippi. Number one, it was a non-Jewish territory, which means that it had greater population of Gentiles. They were not Jews. That's number one. Number two is that it was a place where we had more than 15 or 16 temples. belonging to the Syrian idol we call Baal. Baal, the worship of Baal. So it was a place of idolatry. It was also the place that is believed that the god, the nature god called Pan, P-A-N, originated. Number 3. Number 4, it was the place also that many Jews believe that is the origin of River Jordan. I hope you know the implication of that. The implication is that we are connecting to baptism. We are also connecting to the significance of, of the River Jordan in the Old Testament that reminds us of deliverance. Now, when you look at the picture of this, you understand that Jesus came into the world because this is a microcosm of the macrocosm. The world is the macrocosm. The Caesarea Philippi is the microcosm. So Jesus comes into this kind of situation, a world that have replaced God. Because idolatry means the replacement of God. Idolatry is not when you just bring up something and begin to bow to it. No. Idolatry simply means when we remove God and replace God with either our money, with our possessions, with the people around us, or with anything, so far as God is put in the second place. That is idolatry. Anything that takes the place of God is idolatry. So Jesus, reveals himself in such a place, reminding us that he has come that we may put God back to where he belongs. That's number 1. You see also the issue of the origin of River Jordan, reminding us basically that Jesus comes to purify us. Because baptism means cleansing. Baptism means deliverance. You cast your mind back to the symbol of the River Jordan in the Old Testament. Remember that Joshua crossed the Israelites through the River Jordan before they got to the promised land. My dear brothers and sisters, when we look at these things, you will see clearly why did Jesus reveal himself in this place. And let me say it clearly. Jesus was not having any kind of identity crisis. No. He wasn't having any kind of identity crisis. But why did Jesus ask his disciples, who do people say that I am? Was Jesus having identity crisis? No. But Jesus was basically trying to understand, because as I said in the beginning, the tension was growing high. Jesus was approaching the time of his, Paschal mystery. So he needed to understand, he needed to know if his disciples, after all this time, have been able to recognize him or to have a little knowledge of him. It would have been a disastrous thing if Peter did not, rescue the other disciples, because it means that they have been with Jesus all this time and they did not know who he is. You see, how many years have I been a priest? How many years have I been a Christian? How well do I know Jesus? Do I have a personal encounter with Jesus? Do I have this personal knowledge of Jesus? Do I have this personal intimacy with Jesus? My intimacy with Jesus is what determines the way I know him. It is not about how many years you have been a Christian. Rather, it's not about the quantity. Rather, it is about the quality. And the quality is determined by my relationship, the intimacy of my relationship with Jesus. And Jesus asked them the question, and look at how beautiful teacher Jesus is. He did not say to them, oh, you have answered wrongly. He never said that. Because everything they answered was actually right. Jesus was the prophet. He was the prophet that Moses spoke about in the book of Deuteronomy. God will send you a prophet. Jesus is that prophet. Why? Because Jesus, a prophet, is the mouthpiece of God. A prophet is one who stands between God and man, communicating the word of God to man and bringing the dispositions of humanity to God. That's the function of the prophet. My dear brothers and sisters, a prophet being the mouthpiece of God, Jesus himself is the God. John chapter 1, beginning from verse 1, we see that Jesus is God. So my dear sisters and brothers, they say that Jesus is either the prophet, Jeremiah, or Isaiah, or one of the prophets. But remember, we look at those prophets, many of them try to evade, try to run away from God. But when you look at the first reading, Isaiah chapter 50, beginning from verse 5 to 9, you will see clearly the kind of prophet that Jesus is. The prophet who is submissive, the prophet who surrenders himself, the prophet who trusted in the eternal faithfulness of God. That's the kind of prophet that Jesus is. The prophet who gave his life that the followers may have life. He died that you and I may live. So, secondly, Jesus asked them the question, who do you say that I am? Who do you say I am? So, public opinion. Jesus loved public opinion. You see, Jesus was not, someone who was full of himself. No, he cared about what the people said about him. For me, this is very important. Number one is that he is a good teacher. He never said to them that you are wrong. When I started my doctorate in St. Carlos University, I met a lecturer. I don't want to mention his name, but when I saw him, I thought he was a priest. Because the way he taught us, he was the one who asked us to watch The Three Idiots. It's an Indian movie, Three Idiots. Maybe you have watched it. But the way he taught us, I never heard him say to any of the students, your answer is wrong. You see, that's what Jesus did today. He never said to any of them, oh, your answer is wrong. But when Peter got the answer, yeah, you got it. Now, we see that teacher par excellence. We also see the person who is open-minded. Then we see the patience of Jesus. We see that patience coming out clearly. Then we see Jesus asking you and I, who do you say that I am? In the beginning of this Mass, I say that my portrait, the identity of Jesus I have in my head is what shapes my Christianity. Before we became priests, I think I shared the story. Our retreat moderator in ordination time asked us to choose the image of Jesus that we are going to bring into the ministry. I chose the Maayong Magbalantai. I chose the Good Shepherd. I chose Jesus, the Good Shepherd. And that has in so many ways conditioned my priesthood. So today, as we are talking about this identity issue, it is good for us to, shape our own identity by the kind of identity of Jesus we have. Is it the poor Jesus you like? Is it the Jesus who is the conqueror you like? Is it the Jesus who is the redeemer, the Jesus who is the savior, the Jesus who is the healer, or the Jesus who got angry in John chapter 2? Or do you like the Jesus who turns water into wine? Or do you like the Jesus who confronted the Pharisees in Matthew chapter 23? What kind of image of Jesus do you like? Do you like the Jesus who resurrected? St. Paul will say, we are not preaching just the risen Christ, but we are preaching the Jesus who suffered, died, and rose again. My dear brothers and sisters, then we see Peter answering. If we look at Matthew chapter 16, the Bible tells us more about the profession of faith of Peter. But today, Mark makes it very short. Of course, you know that Mark was the first written gospel. Matthew was placed first because of the position of the Jews in our salvation history. But Mark was the original gospel. But this should not bother you, okay? But I want to say clearly that after Jesus, received that, he said to them, be warned, do not share who I am to anyone. Why? Because even though that Peter said, you are the Messiah, you are the Christ, Peter did not understand what he meant, what he was really talking about. Because if you look at the version of St. Matthew, the Gospel according to St. Matthew, you will see that Jesus himself said to Peter, it was not you who said this, rather it was my Father who revealed this to you. Which means that ordinarily, maybe Peter did not understand what he was talking about. And that's why we see Peter, which brings us to the second part of the Gospel, the great rebuke. Peter took Jesus aside because after Peter said that you are the Christ, then Jesus began to reveal to them that he was going to suffer, he was going to be beaten, they are going to do all kinds of things to him, which is what we see in the first reading. Because in the first reading we see part of the suffering servant hymn. There are 4 suffering servant hymn, beginning from Isaiah chapter 42, up to Isaiah chapter 53. The one we read today from Isaiah chapter 50 is the third hymn of the suffering servant. Then we see that the kind of Messiah that Jesus is a suffering Messiah. He's not going to conquer the world like David did, but he is going to conquer the world through his suffering. By dying on that cross, he is going to conquer the world through love. He's going to conquer the world through his humility. Philippians chapter 2 from verse 6 to 11. So, that is the kind of Messiah that Jesus is. But Peter and others did not understand it fully, because you know that the Israelites, they had this, waiting and waiting. They had this conception that the Messiah is going to be like David. Remember that the Israelites, they have been, slaves for so long a time. From Egypt, then to the Persians, then to the Babylonians, then to the Greeks, then to the Romans. Assyrians also, that's Babylon. So they have been slaves so long a time. So they have been praying and waiting. And that's why the Psalm, I think Psalm 80 says, God of hosts, bring us back, let your face shine on us, and we shall be saved. O shepherd of Israel, hear us, you who lead Joseph's flock. Shine upon your cherubim throne, upon Ephraim, Benjamin, Manasseh. O Lord, rouse up your might. O Lord, come to our help. That was the cry of the Israelites, asking God to deliver them. They were waiting for a Messiah, and they were expecting that Messiah to be a conqueror's Messiah. But Jesus surprised them, and that's what Peter could not take. In the beginning of this Mass, I prayed for openness to change. Openness to change. Peter and others were not open for that kind of change. And that's why Peter took Jesus by the side and said, Simbako. In Bisaya we say, Simbako. God forbid. You will not die like that. You are the Messiah. You will not die like that. So, Peter was thinking partly that Jesus was a political Messiah. And Jesus corrected him. You see, yesterday, a few days ago, I posted in my Facebook page that if what will be your reaction if someone will correct you openly? Peter took Jesus by the side, respecting him, trying to say, don't do that. Don't say you're going to die. But Jesus corrected him in the public, because the Bible tells us today that Jesus looked at his disciples and rebuked Peter. Let us remember that this rebuke is different from what we see in Matthew chapter 4 in the temptation story. Kupare opisomo Satanas. When Jesus said to Satan, what Jesus said to Satan in Matthew chapter 4 is, get lost. That's not the same thing that he said to Peter today. What he said to Peter is what we are going to see in the third condition of discipleship. What Jesus said to Peter is, get behind me. Don't be my leader. You should be my student. You should not be my leader. You should be my follower, my disciple. That's what Jesus said to Peter. And the difference is that Jesus said to Satan, get lost. But he did not say to Peter, get lost. He said to Peter, get behind me and learn from me. Do not lead your God. So, then we see that very clearly, my dear brothers and sisters. Today's gospel reading is so beautiful, very, very beautiful. And Peter professed his faith, but he was corrected instantly. So Jesus can correct us, and we should be open to change. Now, Jesus continues by giving us what we call the 3 dispositions or conditions for discipleship. And that's also what I consider the condition for eternal life. Number 1, he says to us, you must deny yourself. Number 2, he says, take up your cross. Number 4, he says, follow me. You see what he told Peter? Get behind me. Now, when you look at that, deny yourself, to deny oneself means the self is characterized with a lot of appetites, desires, longings, and all that cravings and emotions. That's what the self is characterized with. The self is always looking for drinking, for sex, for gluttony, for all kinds of things. The self is so insatiable. And Jesus says to us, deny that. It means say no to whatever your flesh is pushing you to do. Say no to it. Say no whenever your human will is pushing you to do something contrary to the will of God. What Jesus is saying is that we should enthrone God in our life. We should make God the first in our life. That's what Jesus is basically saying. Denial of self means enthrone God and dethrone our human will. Make God preeminent. Make God the center of your life. That's what Jesus was saying. Now the second one, he says, take up your cross. We have to discomfort ourselves. We have to really, detach ourselves. It's an invitation to embrace detachment. And the third one, as Jesus says to us, follow me. Learn from me. Come to me. I will empower you. My dear brothers and sisters, we can never become good Christians if Jesus did not empower us. As Peter professed his faith today, we are invited to profess our faith. We are invited to profess our faith not just through I believe in God, but we are invited to profess our faith, number one, by making God the center of our lives. We are invited to profess our faith by believing and trusting in the eternal faithfulness of God. We are invited to profess our faith in believing that God will deliver us, as we see in the first reading. Number four, we are invited to profess our faith in God by submitting and surrendering our human will to the divine will. Number five, we are invited, to profess our faith by being generous with our 3 T's, our time, our treasure, and our talents. We are invited also from the second reading to share what we have. I shared with you my story when I was quarantined after my return to the Philippines. I was so shocked that even when I called my fellow priests, they said to me, "Oh my God, we will pray for you." How can you see someone who is suffering and you say to the person, "I will pray for you"? Will the person eat, "I will pray for you"? No, the person will not eat that. So, our love, our faith should be a practical faith. It's not just enough to say, "I believe in God, I believe." No, it is better to say, "I believe in God," and you practicalize it. That's what James is calling us to do. It was not enough for Peter to say, "You are the Christ." But as we can see in the life of Peter, he was going to give his life. So, if we say we believe in God, we should be able to be generous. If we say we believe in God, we should be compassionate. If we say we profess that we are Christians, we should be people who share our time, our talent, and our treasure.